Montana Territory, 1876. The wind swept across the empty plateau with a loneliness that Ethan Rawlins had come to accept as his constant companion. At 25, he owned 500 acres of good grazing land, a sturdy cabin, and enough cattle to make him a respectable living. What he did not have was hope that his life would ever be anything more than this endless cycle of work, silence, and solitude. He had learned the hard truth young. Love was a luxury the frontier could not afford. His mother had loved his father, and that love had kept her chained to a violent drunk until consumption finally freed her when Ethan was 14. His older brother had loved a girl from town, and when she died giving birth to their stillborn son, he had put a bullet through his own head rather than face the world without her. Ethan had buried them both before his 16th birthday. No, the frontier was no place for love. It was a place for survival, for working until your body ached too much to think, for building something solid that could not be taken away by death or heartbreak. Ethan had convinced himself that was enough. A man could live a full life without risking his heart. He had seen what happened when you gave yourself over to caring for someone. The land took everything eventually. Better to keep your distance, to rely only on yourself. He was riding back from checking his north pasture when he heard it, a sound so out of place in the vast emptiness that he almost thought he had imagined it. Crying. Not the wail of a coyote or the cry of a hawk, but the unmistakable sound of a woman weeping. Ethan pulled his horse to a stop and listened. There it was again, coming from the direction of the creek that marked the eastern boundary of his property. He hesitated. Getting involved in someone else's trouble was exactly the kind of complication he had spent years avoiding. But the sound was so broken, so utterly desolate, that he found himself turning his horse toward it before he had consciously made the decision. He found her sitting on a flat rock beside the creek, her face buried in her hands, her whole body shaking with sobs. She wore a simple brown traveling dress, dusty and torn at the hem, and her blonde hair had come loose from its pins to fall around her shoulders. A small canvas bag lay beside her, and there was no horse, no wagon, nothing to indicate how she had come to be alone in the middle of nowhere. Ethan dismounted quietly, not wanting to startle her, but when his boot scraped against stone, she jerked her head up with a gasp. Her eyes were red from crying, but even swollen and tear-streaked, her face held a beauty that struck him like a physical blow. She looked young, maybe 20 or 21, with delicate features and eyes the color of a summer sky. "Please," she said, her voice hoarse, "please, I am not trespassing on purpose. I will leave. I just needed to rest." "You are on my land," Ethan said, keeping his voice level, "but I am not going to run you off. Are you hurt?" She shook her head, then seemed to reconsider. "Not injured, no." "But I am," she trailed off, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. Something in Ethan's chest twisted painfully. He had built walls around himself for years, had perfected the art of not caring, but looking at this crying girl beside his creek, he felt something crack open inside him. He knew with uncertainty that terrified him that his life had just changed irrevocably. "What is your name?" he asked, moving closer but maintaining a respectful distance. "Zelda Vance," she said. "I was traveling to Silver Creek to work as a teacher. The wagon I was riding in broke a wheel 15 miles back. The driver said he would fix it, but when I woke this morning, he had taken everything of value and left me." Her voice broke. "I walked all day. I have nowhere to go." Ethan felt anger rise in him at the thought of someone abandoning a woman alone in this country. "Silver Creek is another 40 miles northeast," he said. "You cannot make that on foot without supplies." "I know," she looked down at her hands. "I keep thinking I should be braver than this. I thought I was strong enough for the frontier. Everyone back in Philadelphia told me I was foolish to come west alone, that a woman had no business trying to make her own way out here. I suppose they were right." "They were wrong," Ethan said, surprising himself with the vehemence in his voice. "You were brave to come here. That driver was a coward and a thief. Being abandoned is not the same as being weak." Zelda looked up at him, studying his face as if trying to determine whether he meant it. Ethan felt exposed under her gaze, as though she could see through all his carefully constructed armor. "I have a cabin about 3 miles west," he said. "You can stay there tonight, rest, eat. In the morning, I will take you to Silver Creek." "I could not impose," she began, but he cut her off. "You have no choice. There are wolves in these hills, and worse than wolves. You will not survive another night out here alone." She hesitated, then nodded. Thank you, Mr. Rawlins, you are very kind. Ethan, he said, just Ethan. He helped her onto his horse and walked alongside, leading the animal by the reins. Zelda sat quietly, and Ethan found himself acutely aware of her presence, of how small and fragile she seemed perched on his saddle. He told himself he was just doing the decent thing, that he would deliver her to Silver Creek and forget about her. But even as he thought it, he knew it was a lie. When they reached his cabin, he helped her down and showed her inside. It was not much, a single room with a bed in one corner, a table and chairs, a wood stove, and shelves lined with tins and tools. But it was clean and solid, and Zelda looked at it as though it were a palace. "It is wonderful," she said softly. Ethan felt an unfamiliar flush of pride. "You take the bed, I will sleep outside." "I cannot take your bed." "You can and you will. I have slept outdoors more times than I can count. One more night will not hurt me." He built up the fire and heated water so she could wash, then made a simple meal of beans and cornbread. They ate in silence at first, but gradually Zelda began to talk. She told him about her life in Philadelphia, about losing both parents to fever the previous winter, about having no family left and deciding she wanted to start fresh somewhere new. "I thought I could make a difference as a teacher," she said. "I thought I could help children learn, give them opportunities. Now I wonder if I was just running away." "From what?" Ethan asked. "From emptiness. From being alone in a city full of people who did not care if I lived or died." She looked at him. "Is that cowardly?" "No," Ethan said, "that is human." He found himself talking too, telling her things he had never spoken aloud. About his mother and brother, about why he had chosen to live out here alone, about the belief he had carried for so long that isolation was safer than connection. "That sounds lonely," Zelda said quietly. "It is safe," Ethan replied. "Are those the same thing?" The question unsettled him. He stood abruptly, saying he needed to tend to his horse. Outside, under the vast Montana sky, he tried to collect himself. He had known this woman for a few hours, and already she was making him question everything he thought he understood about his life. When he returned, Zelda was standing by the window, looking out at the darkness. "Thank you for helping me," she said. "Most men would not have bothered." "Most men are not worth much," Ethan said. She turned to face him. "You are different from what I expected. When I first saw you, I thought you would be hard, maybe cruel, but you are kind. Why do you hide out here alone?" "I told you it is safer." "Safer for whom?" Ethan had no answer for that. He bid her good night and went outside, laying out his bedroll under the stars, but sleep would not come. He kept thinking about Zelda's tears by the creek, about the way her face had looked when she smiled at his cabin, about the loneliness in her voice when she spoke of Philadelphia. He had spent years building a life predicated on the belief that caring for someone would only lead to pain. But lying there under the endless sky, he wondered if perhaps the pain of loneliness was worse than the risk of loss. And he wondered what it would be like to wake up every morning to someone who looked at him the way Zelda had, with genuine interest and warmth. Morning came too soon. Ethan woke to find Zelda already up, the cabin cleaned and coffee brewing on the stove. She had somehow managed to repair the worst of the tears in her dress and had repinned her blonde hair neatly. "You did not have to do all this," Ethan said. "I wanted to, you have been so generous." She poured him coffee, her movements graceful and sure. "I have been thinking about Silver Creek." Ethan's chest tightened. "What about it?" "I sent a letter when I accepted the teaching position, telling them when I would arrive. That was supposed to be 3 days ago. They have probably already hired someone else." "You do not know that." "Even if they have not, what kind of teacher shows up filthy and alone, with no possessions and no references to prove who she is?" "I lost everything when that man robbed me, my papers, my certificates, the letters from the school board." She set down her own coffee cup, her hands trembling slightly. "I have been trying to think what to do. I have no money to get back east, even if I wanted to, which I do not. I cannot simply appear in Silver Creek with nothing and expect charity." "What will you do?" Ethan asked, though part of him already knew what he wanted her answer to be, and that terrified him. "I was hoping you might know of someone who needs help, a family with children who needs a governess, or a boarding house that needs a cook. I can read and write and do figures. I can cook and clean and sew. I will do any honest work." Ethan looked at her standing in his cabin, the morning light catching the gold in her hair, and felt the walls he had spent years building begin to crumble. He wanted to tell her to stay here with him. He wanted to say he would take care of her, that she did not have to face the uncertainty alone. But the words stuck in his throat, trapped behind a decade of carefully maintained distance. "I will ask around Silver Creek," he said finally. "Someone there will need help." Something flickered across Zelda's face, disappointment maybe, but she smiled and nodded. "Thank you. You have already done more than I had any right to expect." They set out after breakfast, Zelda riding while Ethan walked alongside. The journey to Silver Creek would take most of the day, and Ethan found himself deliberately slowing his pace, drawing out the time before he would have to say goodbye to her. They talked as they traveled, the conversation flowing more easily than it had the night before. Zelda asked about the land, about ranching, about what it took to survive out here. Ethan found himself explaining things he had never bothered to put into words before, about how you read the weather in the shape of clouds, about how you could tell good grazing land by the types of grass, about the satisfaction of building something with your own hands. "You love it," Zelda observed. "The land, I mean, the way you talk about it." "I suppose I do," Ethan admitted. "It is hard and unforgiving, but it is honest. It does not pretend to be something it is not. Unlike people. Unlike some people." They stopped at midday to rest the horse and eat the bread and dried meat Ethan had packed. Sitting in the shade of a cottonwood tree, Zelda said, "Tell me more about your mother." Ethan tensed. "Why?" "Because you mentioned her last night and your voice changed when you did. She was important to you." He wanted to deflect, to change the subject, but something about the genuine interest in Zelda's eyes made him answer honestly. "She was gentle, too gentle for this place. My father was a drunk and mean with it. She could have left, should have left, but she loved him, or she thought she did. That love kept her trapped until it killed her. That must have been hard to watch. It taught me what I needed to know. Love makes you weak out here. It makes you stay in bad situations, makes you vulnerable. My brother learned the same lesson, just in a different way." Zelda was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I think that is very sad." "Sad but true." "Is it? Your mother's situation was not about love, it was about fear and lack of options. And your brother's tragedy was not caused by love, it was caused by loss. Those are not the same thing as love itself being dangerous." "They are close enough," Ethan said. "I disagree, love is not what hurt them. Circumstances did, bad luck did. But love, real love, gives people a reason to survive hard circumstances. It makes them stronger, not weaker." "You are young," Ethan said, hearing the harshness in his own voice. "You have not seen enough to know." "I am 20 years old," Zelda said, meeting his eyes steadily. "Old enough to have buried both my parents, old enough to have crossed half a continent alone. Old enough to know that the only thing that made losing them bearable was knowing they loved each other and me. That love did not make them weak, Ethan. It made their lives matter." Her words struck something deep inside him, but he pushed the feeling away. "We should keep moving," he said, standing abruptly. They rode on in silence, and Ethan told himself he was glad for it. He needed to remember why he had chosen solitude, needed to reinforce the walls Zelda had been steadily dismantling since he found her by the creek. But then, as the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, they rounded a bend in the trail and found trouble waiting. 3 men sat on horses blocking the path ahead. They were rough-looking, unshaven and dirty, with the kind of hard eyes that marked them as dangerous. Ethan recognized one of them, a drifter named Cole who had been run out of Silver Creek the previous year for stealing. "Well now," Cole said, grinning to show crooked teeth. "Look what we have here, pretty lady all alone with just one cowboy to protect her." Ethan moved to place himself between the men and Zelda. "Move aside. We have no quarrel with you." "Maybe we have one with you," said another of the men, lean and mean-looking. "That is a nice horse you got there, and that lady looks like she might have some valuables." "I have nothing," Zelda said, her voice steady despite the fear Ethan could see in her eyes. "I was robbed 2 days ago." "That is a shame," Cole said, "but I bet a pretty thing like you has something worth taking. Why don't you come down here and let us have a look?" Ethan's hand moved to the pistol at his hip. "That is not going to happen. Move aside or we will go through you." The third man, older than the other two with a scar across his cheek, laughed. 3 against 1, cowboy, and you got a lady to worry about. Those are not good odds for you. Ethan's mind raced. The man was right. If it came to a fight, he might be able to take 1 or even 2 of them, but not all 3, and not without leaving Zelda vulnerable. He needed a different approach. There is a cavalry patrol that comes through here every week, he said, keeping his voice calm. They were in Silver Creek yesterday. Could be they are on their way back right now. You really want to risk them finding you threatening a woman? It was a bluff. The cavalry came through irregularly at best, and Ethan had no idea where they were. But the men did not know that. Cole glanced at his companions, uncertainty flickering across his face. He could be lying. Could be, the scarred man agreed, but could also be telling the truth, and I do not fancy getting hung for threatening some school teacher. Ethan felt a flicker of hope, but then the lean man drew his gun. I say we take what we want and move on. They cannot report us if they are dead. Everything happened fast. Ethan drew and fired in one smooth motion, hitting the lean man in the shoulder and sending him tumbling from his horse. Cole went for his own gun, but Ethan was already moving, grabbing the reins of his horse and spurring forward, trusting Zelda to hold on. A shot rang out behind them, but they were already around the bend, the horse's hooves pounding the trail. Ethan did not slow until they had put a mile between them and the outlaws, and when he finally stopped, his hands were shaking with adrenaline and fear. "Are you hurt?" he demanded, turning to look at Zelda. She was pale but composed. "No, I am fine, are you?" Yes, he checked behind them, but there was no sign of pursuit. The outlaws had probably decided the risk was not worth it, especially with one of them wounded. "You saved us," Zelda said softly. "You could have been killed." "So could you," Ethan said, and the thought of it hit him like a punch to the gut. For a moment, when that man had drawn his gun, Ethan had seen Zelda lying dead on the ground, had felt a terror so profound it had eclipsed his own fear of dying. The realization shook him to his core. "I was not frightened," Zelda said. "I knew you would protect me." "You should not have that kind of faith in anyone," Ethan said, his voice rough. "I am just one man. I cannot protect you from everything this country has to throw at you." "No one can protect anyone from everything," Zelda said. "But that does not mean we should not try. That does not mean we should face it all alone." She was crying again, but this time Ethan understood that these were not tears of despair but of release, of relief, and perhaps something more. He found himself reaching up to touch her cheek, brushing away the wetness with his thumb. "When I saw you crying by that creek," he said, "I knew something, but I have been too afraid to admit what it was." "What did you know?" Zelda whispered. "That you were going to change everything. That no matter how hard I tried to hold on to my safe, solitary life, you had already destroyed it. I knew you were the one who would make me risk everything I had been trying to protect." "Is that a bad thing?" Ethan looked at her, at this brave, beautiful woman who had appeared in his life like a miracle, and felt the last of his resistance crumble. "I thought it was, now I am not sure." They rode on to Silver Creek as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Ethan's mind churned with conflicting thoughts. Part of him still wanted to leave Zelda in town and ride back to his safe, empty cabin. But a larger part, a part that was growing stronger by the moment, could not imagine letting her go. Silver Creek was a small town, just a main street with a general store, a saloon, a church, and a scattering of houses. Ethan took Zelda to the boarding house run by Mrs. Henderson, a widow he knew to be decent and fair. "I need a room for the lady," he told Mrs. Henderson. "I will pay for a week." "That is not necessary," Zelda protested, but Ethan ignored her. Mrs. Henderson looked between them with sharp, knowing eyes. "A week, you say? And what happens after that?" "I am hoping to inquire about the teaching position," Zelda said, "if it is still available." "Oh, that," Mrs. Henderson shook her head. "The school board hired someone 3 days ago when the woman they were expecting never showed up. Are you Miss Vance, by any chance?" Zelda's face fell. I was robbed on the way here, all my papers, everything. I had no way to send word." "Well, that is a shame. The position is filled now, and I doubt they will be looking for another teacher anytime soon. Silver Creek is not big enough for 2. Ethan saw Zelda struggle to maintain her composure. "I understand, thank you for telling me." I will still pay for the room, Ethan said. Miss Vance needs a place to stay while she figures out her next step. After Zelda had been shown to a small but clean room, Ethan went to the saloon to think. He sat alone at a table with a whiskey he did not drink, turning his glass in circles and staring at nothing. He knew what he wanted to do. He wanted to go back to that boarding house, tell Zelda to forget about teaching positions in Silver Creek, and ask her to come back to his ranch. He wanted to offer her a place in his life, to see if this strange connection between them could become something real and lasting. But wanting it did not make it right. He had nothing to offer her but a hard life and an isolated cabin. She deserved better than a broken man who had spent 10 years hiding from the world. She deserved someone whole, someone who knew how to love without fear. You look like a man wrestling with his conscience. Ethan looked up to find an older man standing by his table. He recognized him as Frank Morrison, the owner of the general store and one of the founding members of Silver Creek. "Just thinking," Ethan said. "Mind if I join you? I have something you might want to hear." Ethan gestured to the empty chair, and Morrison sat down with a sigh. "I saw you come in with that young lady, heard Mrs. Henderson telling her the teaching job was filled. News travels fast. It does in a small town. Here is the thing. My niece was supposed to come live with me and my wife this summer, help out with the store and keep us company. But she wrote last month to say she has gotten engaged and will not be coming. We could use someone to help with the store and the house. The pay would not be much, but it comes with room and board." Ethan felt hope flare in his chest. "Are you offering Miss Vance a job?" "If she is interested." "Martha, that is my wife. She has been lonely since our daughter married and moved to California. She would be glad of the company, and a young woman who was brave enough to come out here to teach is probably smart enough to help run a store." "Why are you telling me this?" Morrison gave him a knowing look. "Because I saw the way you looked at her when you thought no one was watching, and I saw the way she looked at you. Seemed to me like you could use a reason to come to town more often than once a month." Ethan felt his face heat. "It is not like that, I just helped her." "Sure you did, and I am sure that is all it is." Morrison stood, clapping Ethan on the shoulder. "Have her come by the store tomorrow morning if she is interested. And Ethan, do not be an idiot about this. Opportunities like this do not come along often out here." After Morrison left, Ethan sat alone for a long time. Then he drained his whiskey in one gulp and headed back to the boarding house. Zelda answered his knock looking worried. "Is something wrong?" "No, I have news. Frank Morrison, he owns the general store, needs help. He is offering you a job, room and board included." Zelda's face lit up. "Truly? Oh, that is wonderful. I was lying here trying not to panic about what I would do." "There is something else," Ethan said. "If you take the job, you will be here in Silver Creek. My ranch is only a few hours' ride. I come to town for supplies sometimes." "I know," Zelda said softly. "I was thinking about that." "You were?" "Yes. I was thinking that if I stayed in Silver Creek, I might see you again. I was hoping that would happen." Ethan's heart hammered in his chest. "Zelda, I need to be honest with you. I am not good at this, at people, at caring. I have spent 10 years convincing myself it was better to be alone. And now I think maybe I was wrong. Maybe I was just afraid." Zelda stepped closer, looking up at him with those clear blue eyes. "I am afraid too. But I think maybe being afraid together is better than being safe and alone. At least, that is what I would like to find out." Ethan reached out slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, and took her hand. Her fingers were small and warm in his, and the simple touch felt like the most profound thing he had ever experienced. "I do not know how to do this," he admitted. "I do not know how to be what you need." "I do not need you to be anything but honest," Zelda said. "I do not need perfect, I just need real." Standing there in the doorway of a boarding house in a small Montana town, Ethan Rawlins made a choice. He chose to be vulnerable. He chose to risk his heart. He chose to believe that maybe, just maybe, love could survive even in the harsh and unforgiving frontier. "Will you let me court you properly?" he asked. "Let me come visit, take you to church socials, do this the right way?" "Yes," Zelda said, smiling through tears. "I would like that very much." Over the following months, Ethan became a familiar sight in Silver Creek. He found reasons to come to town twice a week, 3 times when he could manage it. He would arrive at the general store with his hat in his hands, asking politely if Miss Vance might have time for a walk or a meal at the boarding house. Zelda thrived in her new position. Martha Morrison doted on her like a daughter, and Zelda proved herself invaluable at the store, her education and quick mind making her a natural at managing inventory and handling accounts. The townspeople took to her immediately, charmed by her warmth and intelligence, but it was during her time with Ethan that she truly bloomed. They would walk along the creek that ran behind the town, talking about everything and nothing. Ethan found himself opening up in ways he never had before, sharing his hopes and fears, his plans for expanding his herd, his dreams of building something lasting. Zelda told him about her childhood in Philadelphia, about the mother who had taught her to read and the father who had encouraged her education. She spoke of her grief at losing them, but also of her determination to honor their memory by living fully and bravely. "They would have liked you," she told Ethan one evening as they sat watching the sunset from a bench outside the church. "You think so?" "I know so. My father always said the measure of a man was not in what he said, but in what he did. Your actions speak well of you, Ethan Rawlins." "I am just doing what feels right." "That is exactly my point." One Sunday after church, Ethan finally worked up the courage to invite Zelda to visit his ranch. "It is not much," he warned, "just a cabin and cattle, but I would like you to see it to understand what kind of life it is out there." "I would love to see your home," Zelda said. They made the journey the following Saturday, Zelda riding beside Ethan on a gentle mare he had borrowed from Morrison's stable. When they crested the rise and his cabin came into view, Ethan felt a moment of embarrassment at how small and rough it looked. But Zelda gasped with delight. "It is perfect," she said. "Look at the view and the way you have positioned the cabin to catch the morning sun. Oh, Ethan, it is wonderful." She explored everything with genuine enthusiasm, exclaiming over his vegetable garden, admiring the solid construction of his barn, asking intelligent questions about his cattle operation. Ethan found himself seeing his home through her eyes, recognizing not its limitations but its potential. They had lunch on a blanket outside, and afterward Zelda said, "Tell me something. What do you want for your future?" "Not just the ranch, but your life." Ethan was quiet for a moment, gathering his thoughts. "For a long time, I just wanted to survive, to build something secure and not risk anything more than that. But lately, I have been thinking maybe I want more." "Like what?" "Like a family, children running around that yard, a wife to share the work in the quiet evenings, a life that means something beyond just existing." "That sounds beautiful," Zelda said softly. "It does to me too, now, but it scares me, Zelda. What if I am not good at it? What if I fail the way my father failed my mother?" "You could not," Zelda said with absolute certainty. "You are nothing like what you described. You are kind and thoughtful and honest. You would never hurt someone you loved." "How can you be so sure?" "Because I know you. I see who you are, not just who you are afraid of becoming." Ethan turned to look at her, this remarkable woman who had stumbled into his life and changed everything. "I love you," he said, the words feeling both terrifying and liberating. "I think I have loved you since I found you crying by the creek. I fought it because I was afraid, but I cannot fight it anymore." "I love you, Zelda." Tears streamed down Zelda's face, but she was smiling. "I love you too. I have been waiting for you to say it, hoping you would but afraid you might not. I am saying it now, and I am asking you to marry me. I know it has only been 4 months, and I know I do not have much to offer except a hard life and a man who is still learning how to open his heart. But I promise I will spend every day trying to make you happy. I promise I will never take your love for granted. Will you marry me?" "Yes," Zelda said without hesitation. "Yes, Ethan, I will marry you." He kissed her then, gentle and reverent, and felt the last of his fear fall away. Whatever challenges the frontier threw at them, they would face them together. They were married 6 weeks later in the little church in Silver Creek, with half the town in attendance. Martha Morrison wept happily throughout the ceremony, and Frank gave Zelda away with the pride of a father. Ethan stood at the altar in his best suit, watching Zelda walk toward him in a simple white dress Martha had helped her make, and thought he had never seen anything more beautiful in his life. That night back at the ranch that was now their home, Ethan held his wife in his arms and marveled at how profoundly his life had changed. The loneliness that had been his constant companion for so long was gone, replaced by a sense of belonging he had never thought possible. "Are you happy?" Zelda asked, her head resting on his chest. "More than I knew I could be," Ethan said honestly. "You saved me, Zelda, from a life that was not really living." "We saved each other," she corrected. "I was lost and alone, and you found me. We found each other." The first year of their marriage brought challenges. There was a drought that summer that tested their water supply and forced Ethan to drive part of his herd to distant pasture. Zelda went with him, proving herself as capable on horseback as any ranch hand. When winter came harsh and early, they spent long months snowed in, but instead of the cabin feeling too small, it felt cozy and safe with Zelda's presence filling it with warmth. She transformed their home, not just with curtains and rugs and the small touches that made it comfortable, but with her very presence. The silence that had once defined Ethan's life was replaced by conversation and laughter. Zelda sang while she worked, made plans for expanding the garden in spring, and kept accounts that showed Ethan exactly how much his operation had grown since she arrived. But more than the practical help, it was the emotional transformation that astounded Ethan. Zelda had been right that day by the creek. Love did not make him weak, it made him stronger. Knowing she was waiting for him at home gave him a reason to push through hard days. Sharing his burdens with her made them lighter. And the joy they found in simple moments together, sitting on the porch at sunset or lying in bed talking late into the night, gave his life a richness he had never imagined. In the spring of their second year together, Zelda told him she was pregnant. Ethan felt the old fear try to rise up, remembering his brother's tragedy, but Zelda took his face in her hands and said firmly, "We are going to be fine. All three of us, you have to trust that." "I do trust it," Ethan realized. "I trust you and I trust us." Their daughter was born in October during the first snowfall of the season. Ethan delivered her himself when it became clear they would not make it to the doctor in Silver Creek in time. Holding his newborn child in his arms, seeing Zelda exhausted but radiant in their bed, Ethan wept for the first time since burying his brother. "These are happy tears," he assured Zelda, who had struggled to sit up in concern. "I know," she said, smiling. "I can tell." They named the baby Emma Rose, and she became the center of their world. Ethan discovered a capacity for tenderness he had not known he possessed, spending hours just watching his daughter sleep or carrying her around the ranch, showing her everything and telling her stories she was too young to understand. When Emma was 6 months old, Zelda broached a subject she had been thinking about for some time. "I want to start a school," she said. "A school. There are 5 families within a day's ride of us now, and more coming all the time. At least a dozen children who have no access to education. I could teach them here in the cabin, just a few hours a day, a few days a week." Ethan considered it. Their cabin was small, but he had been planning to build an addition anyway. "We would need more room." "So you think it is a good idea?" "I think you would be an excellent teacher, and those children would be lucky to have you." That summer, with help from Frank Morrison and some of the other ranchers, Ethan built a large addition to their cabin. One room was a bedroom for Emma, who was getting too big for the cradle. The other was a schoolroom, with benches Ethan built himself and a blackboard they ordered from Chicago. Zelda's school opened that fall with 8 students ranging in age from 6 to 14. She taught reading, writing, arithmetic, history, and geography, and the children adored her. Their parents were grateful beyond words, and several of the mothers began stopping by regularly, forming friendships with Zelda that eased her own occasional loneliness when Ethan was working long days. Life settled into a rhythm that felt both challenging and deeply satisfying. The ranch continued to grow as Ethan's careful management and Zelda's business acumen combined to make them increasingly prosperous. They added a second room to the school section when enrollment grew to 15 children. Emma thrived, learning to walk and talk, delighting her parents with her bright curiosity and fearless spirit. On a summer evening when Emma was 3 years old, Ethan sat on the porch with Zelda, watching their daughter chase fireflies in the gathering dusk. The sounds of laughter and conversation drifted up from the bunkhouse, where Ethan now employed 2 ranch hands to help with the expanding herd. "Do you remember what you told me that first day?" Zelda asked, leaning against his shoulder. "When I asked why you lived alone." "I told you it was safer," Ethan said. "Do you still believe that?" Ethan looked out at the land he loved. now shared with a wife who was his partner in every sense, at the daughter who had taught him what it meant to have your heart exist outside your body, at the school that brought purpose and community to their remote corner of Montana. "No," he said, "I was wrong about everything. I thought love made you weak, but it is what makes us strong. I thought caring for people made you vulnerable, but it is what gives life meaning. I thought I was protecting myself by staying alone, but I was just afraid. And now I know that loving you and Emma, building this life with you, it is the bravest thing I have ever done. And the best." Zelda turned her face up to his, and he kissed her as the stars began to appear in the vast Montana sky. Emma ran up to them, breathless and grass-stained, demanding her father come see the frog she had found. Ethan scooped her up, making her giggle, and felt gratitude so profound it was almost overwhelming. He had spent 10 years believing the frontier was no place for love, that a man was safer keeping his distance from anything that could hurt him. Then a crying girl by a creek had proven him wrong in every way that mattered. She had shown him that love was not what made you vulnerable to the hardships of frontier life. Love was what gave you the strength to face those hardships and find joy despite them. As the years passed, their family grew again. A son, Thomas, was born when Emma was 5, and twin girls, Grace and Hope, arrived 3 years after that. The ranch prospered, growing to 800 acres. The school Zelda ran became known throughout the territory for the quality of its instruction, and several of her students went on to college back east, a source of immense pride for both her and Ethan. But it was not the material success that defined their happiness. It was the life they had built together, the partnership they had forged, the family they had created. It was sitting together on the porch after the children were in bed, talking through decisions large and small. It was the way they still reached for each other in the night, finding comfort and passion in equal measure. It was watching their children grow strong and confident, raised with the love and security neither Ethan nor Zelda had fully known in their own childhoods. On their 10th anniversary, Ethan took Zelda back to the creek where he had first found her. The spot looked different now, a well-worn path leading to it from their ranch, a favorite place for the children to play on hot summer days. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked. "That you did not end up teaching in Silver Creek the way you planned?" Zelda laughed, the sound as beautiful to him now as it had been that first day. "I ended up teaching anyway, just in a different place. And I gained so much more than I could have imagined. A husband I love beyond measure, 4 beautiful children, a home that feels like it grew from my own heart. No, Ethan, I have no regrets." "Do you?" "Not a single one," Ethan said. "That day I heard you crying here changed my life. I knew it immediately, even though I tried to fight it. I knew you were the one who would teach me how to really live." "We taught each other," Zelda said, echoing words she had spoken 10 years before on their wedding night. "That is what love is supposed to do." They sat by the creek as the sun set, hands intertwined, and Ethan thought about the journey that had brought them here. From a lonely rancher who believed isolation was safety to a husband and father who understood that love was the greatest adventure of all. From a broken man hiding from life to someone who embraced every moment with gratitude and joy. The frontier was still harsh and unforgiving. There were still hard winters and dry summers, still dangers from weather and wildlife and the occasional desperado passing through. But facing those challenges with Zelda beside him, with their children growing strong and bright, with a community they had helped build around them, Ethan knew he was exactly where he was meant to be. Years later, when his hair had gone gray and Emma had children of her own, Ethan would sit on that same porch and tell his grandchildren the story of how he met their grandmother. He would describe a lonely rancher who thought he knew everything about surviving on the frontier, and a crying girl by a creek who taught him he knew nothing about truly living. He would tell them about instant recognition, about fighting fear, about choosing love even when it felt like the riskiest thing in the world. And he would end the story the same way every time, looking over at Zelda, her blonde hair now silver but her blue eyes still as clear and bright as that first day, and saying, "I knew the moment I saw her that she was the one for me. Best decision I ever made was not walking away." The ranch they built together thrived for generations, a testament to what two people could create when they chose courage over fear, connection over isolation, love over the safer but emptier alternative. The school Zelda founded continued long after she stopped teaching, eventually becoming a proper schoolhouse that served the growing community. but their true legacy was not measured in acres or buildings. It was in the life they had lived together, the love they had shown their children and grandchildren, the proof they offered that even in the harshest and most unforgiving places, love could not only survive but flourish. Ethan Rawlins had started his adult life believing the frontier was no place for love. He ended it knowing that love was what had made his frontier life worth living. And when he finally passed away at the age of 78, Zelda's hand in his, surrounded by the family they had created and the legacy they had built, his last thought was one of profound gratitude for the day he had heard a girl crying by his creek and had the wisdom, despite all his fears, not to ride past. Zelda lived another 5 years, spending them surrounded by children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren who all carried pieces of the love story that had started with tears by a creek and ended with a life so full and rich, it became the foundation of an entire family's history. She was buried beside Ethan on the land they had loved and worked together, under the vast Montana sky that had witnessed their journey from lonely strangers to inseparable partners. Their story became legend in that part of Montana, told and retold as an example of frontier romance and enduring love. But more than that, it stood as proof that the greatest courage was not in facing down outlaws or surviving harsh winters. The greatest courage was in opening your heart to another person, in choosing vulnerability over safety, in building a life together despite all the risks and uncertainties the frontier offered. Ethan and Zelda Rawlins had found each other against all odds, had built a love strong enough to withstand everything the harsh frontier could throw at them, and had created a legacy that lasted far beyond their own lives. Their story began with a lonely rancher and a crying girl, and it ended exactly as it should, with a lifetime of love, partnership, and the kind of happiness that comes from choosing courage over fear, together over alone, and love over every safer but emptier alternative.